what is going on, guys? In this video I'm doing a review of the Nexus Player. So let's start off with the remote. It's a very compact design. In fact, it almost looks like a bootleg copy of the Amazon Fire TV remote. There's actually a microphone built inside at the top, which works pretty well with the Google Now voice recognition and search. Overall, it's kind of comfortable. Not the most comfortable remote, but it's okay because of its compact design. Then of course there is a sold separately Gamepad, and this thing looks like an Xbox controller, but for a media player controller it's surprisingly comfortable. The only problem is it's powered by batteries. Unfortunately, it doesn't have its own rechargeable pack inside where you can just connect it to the wall and just charge it directly, which is kind of unfortunate considering its high price tag. So starting over with the physical components, we'll talk about the power. It consumes 18 watts of power, and there's no ability to turn it off. There's no power switch, there's no nothing. Once it's plugged in, it's always on no matter what. Now it does have a sleep mode which consumes less power. It activates when not in use after 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, etc, etc. I just find it bizarre that Google's always preaching about being good to the environment, but their device doesn't turn off. As for the dimensions, it's 120 by 120 by 20 millimeters, and to give you a rough comparison, I'll just put my Note 4 on top of it, and you'll notice that it's significantly smaller than my phablet device. It's a very elegant, sleek looking design. It looks great. It takes up almost no room on your home theater system rack. Now on the back we have an HDMI output port, a micro USB port, and the power adapter port. You notice there's no regular USB port. Now, a lot of people on the internet are claiming it's possible to plug in an Ethernet or a regular USB stick with an adapter. However, there's no guarantee that playing files off your regular USB stick will work. There's also no audio output ports, which is extremely unfortunate. And continue on with the bottom of the device, there is a button, but this is not a power switch. This is a factory data reset button. So if you have a profile loaded onto this device, it'll basically wipe everything and make it as if it was out of the box. Now just slightly over to the bottom front, it's going to be very difficult to see. There is a tiny little mark here. That is the LED light letting you know that the device is actually on and active, which is so difficult to see, it's actually kind of pointless. Now the media player itself is powered by a 1.8 GHz quad-core Intel Atom processor, with the graphics being powered by Imagination PRVR Series 6, with 1 GB of RAM and 8 GB of internal storage. Now that 8 GB of internal storage will sound like a decent amount of space, but you will run out of space quickly if you're playing high graphic Android games. For example, Asphalt 8 and Bars Till are both installed on this media player, but Bars Till still requires that I download additional data, which I can't fit because I've already run out of space. As for internet, as I mentioned, there's no port for Ethernet, so you're stuck with Wi-Fi, but it does support Wi-Fi 802.11, A, B, G, N, and AC signal. Now the reason you're seeing Ethernet here is because this is primarily for developers. If you have a micro USB adapter of some kind, you can actually get Ethernet plugged into that adapter. Unfortunately, this is also the case for a regular USB stick. If you want to plug in a USB stick, you're going to have to use some sort of adapter in the micro USB port, and then you can plug in your USB stick to play content from your media. This also allows you to sideload apps, which is still primarily for developer purposes. Now the problem with this is that even if you sideload a media player app, there's no guarantee it's going to run properly on this media player. Basically, this media player is not designed for you to play your own home videos. It's designed for you to stream services only from Google. What you see here is basically your primary interface. The first top bar is basically just recommendations, which I find to be very random. None of these things are things I would really watch. Of course, just below that is your apps listing, and of course just below that is your games, and so on and so forth. There is also the settings menu, which is quite similar to what you would find on a regular Android phone or tablet device. You have network, Google Cast, which basically allows you to mirror your Android smartphone or tablet to the media player. You have your apps, Daydream. Daydream is basically what will happen when the device goes into an almost sleep mode or standby mode, if you will, because as I mentioned, the device, you can't turn it off manually. So Daydream will basically turn on, and you'll see a whole bunch of wallpapers and whatnot. And of course, there is a sleep mode, which does try to conserve power. After 30 minutes of interval or 1 hour or 2 hours, you can actually set it and change it if you want. But it's still unfortunate because this media player is quite buggy. So if you have to restart it because it'll clear out some of the bugs, you'll have to go over to the media player and unplug it. There's also an additional app available on the Google Play Store for Android phones, which you can download the remote control app for the media player, which is a little bit slow. There's a delay, but it works pretty decent nonetheless, although the interface of the app itself is very plain and boring. However, it does allow you to bring up a keyboard, which can save you time when typing. Overall, the interface itself is simple enough to use, and what's great about it is that it's quite snappy and very responsive. Opening apps is pretty quick, and of course, there is some problems with bugs though. The biggest problem I have with bugs is that sometimes when I'm opening up an app to preview, if I want to download it, sometimes I get a blank screen here. It's pretty random. Sometimes I require that I have to leave the media player on standby for a few minutes, come back to the Google Play Store, and then it works. This is the unfortunate problem with not being able to manually restart the device quickly, which I wish it had a power button instead, because there's a lot of bugs that restarting the device seems to clear up. There's also a built-in search function which works pretty decent, as you expect with Google Now. Movies directed by Steven Spielberg. And it brings up a whole bunch of media related to that actor, director, or so forth and whatnot. Now this includes Google Movies, YouTube videos, but it doesn't include results from Netflix and Hulu, unfortunately, despite them being very popular services. Now moving down to the YouTube app, it does work pretty well. Things are very quick and responsive here. I've had some pretty bad experience with YouTube Leanback on other devices, but this one has been a bit more updated, I guess because it is directly from Google. Overall, the app itself is quite responsive and quick. Of course, that depends primarily on your internet connection. You're able to access your Google account, which is of course connected to your YouTube account. Now the Movies and TV app is where Google really wants you to use this media player. This is like the central hub. Even though they don't mention it, it's pretty obvious because they don't really allow you to play your own home videos on this media player. Streaming movies or downloading and owning movies straight from Google. This is what the main purpose and hub of this media player is. That doesn't mean it excludes Google Play or Google Music, but of course if you want to watch videos, this is where they expect you to go and spend money. Now let's shift back over to the Google Play Store. I want to show something right here that's really annoying. And one of the things I mentioned about bugs is if I go to the search function here, I obviously have the option to use voice search, but you'll notice here if I go to the text search box, it tells me at the bottom of the screen, use the keyboard on your mobile device. There's no way to get rid of this. I can't bring up the keyboard on the Nexus Player back. There is a keyboard that pops up if you select a text box, but ever since I connected it to the Android app remote on my phone, this doesn't go away, even after unplugging the device and turning it back on. Now the next problem I'm going to talk about isn't exactly a bug problem, it's more of a problem with just the general services available. Now it sounds great that you have Google Play available on this media player, which makes you think you have access to hundreds of thousands of apps. That's actually not the case. There's actually next to no apps available. In fact, as of this reviewing, I've had this media player for about 3 months. It seems like game developers or just general app developers don't care about the Nexus Player and Android TV. Now going over the settings menu, just want to glance over this really quickly. There's nothing too extraordinary to show you guys. I'm just going to go through it like this so you guys get a rough idea of what to see. As I mentioned, it's just like an Android smartphone or tablet. There's nothing out of the ordinary here. Keep in mind that I do have the gaming controller, which costs an additional $50, depending on where you live of course. But it took almost half an hour to connect it to this device. It uses Bluetooth, so you would think the connection would be really quick and simple. That's not the case. It took forever to connect it. This media player is full of nothing but bugs. The unfortunate thing is that when I got this media player, I updated the software fully and then tried to connect the media player. So I was running the latest software and I had trouble connecting the gaming controller for about half an hour. And even then, there hasn't been a software update. Google just seems to have abandoned this media player like most of their media player. Does anyone remember the Nexus Q, which was a big flop? Moving along, the Netflix app is pretty decent for what you expect. It loads pretty slow, but I've noticed this is a problem with basically almost every media player. I think it has something to do with Netflix itself, not the media player. And the experience is pretty generic as you expect from any other media player that's running Netflix. In terms of general quality of playback from Netflix and YouTube is pretty much what you expect. It provides great quality picture. Now there's one thing I want to mention that no other reviewer on the internet seems to have mentioned, which is probably the most bizarre thing you could ever find on this media player. There is no built-in web browser in this media player. I know that sounds crazy, but it's actually true. If you look around anywhere, there's no web browser available, there's nothing built in, there's no Google Chrome built into this media player. In fact, I can't find a web browser that actually works properly with this. And now other people on the internet, I've just looked through random forum posts, have said they've sideloaded Google Chrome, they've sideloaded some other random browsers, and it doesn't work properly. It's the most bizarre thing that Google has released a media player, but they have no web browser built into here. Now there's one really cool thing about having Android games on your TV, and that is of course if your TV has a high refresh rate like I do, have 120Hz refresh rate, The games actually have never looked better on a device, well, an Android device for that matter. The only thing to consider here is that when you're playing certain games like Asphalt 8, for example, or Riptide, you will notice a bit of stuttering. This is nothing to really ruin your experience, but you will notice a bit of stuttering. The gaming controller is very comfortable, almost on par with some of the top gaming consoles controllers. And this is surprising considering that this is a media player. And not only that, the response time is pretty impressive, of course if the game is optimized well enough. In terms of screen mirroring, the Nexus 6 supports cast screen. What you're seeing right now is my Nexus 6 being mirrored onto the Nexus Player. Cast screen is basically Google's new method of screen mirroring your Android phone or tablet to a media player device. The thing about cast screen is that it's available on the Nexus 6, Nexus 9, and some other older Nexus devices. If you upgrade to Android Lollipop, you might get the cast screen option available. And it does work pretty good. There's less than a second response time. I'm noticing that the responsiveness is excellent and it works fantastic. In fact, here I'll give you a preview of my camera. There's my microphone right now. This is being shown through the Nexus 6 camera right now, and this works pretty great. However, there's a big problem with this. The Nexus Player does not support Mirrorcast, which Google was pushing for very hard at one point. Because the Mirrorcast feature of mirroring a device to a media player or TV is a much more universal and widely accepted approach to mirroring a device. So that's my review of the Nexus Player. A lot of people will think I'm gone bonkers with they look at the score and they think I'm a bit too harsh, or a lot of people will agree with me. Either way, I'm sticking with my gut. This is a horrible media player. Now let's go over some of the things that are good for it. It's very quick, it's very responsive, it's got a very easy to navigate interface. The controller, even though it's an extra $50, well, I have to mention it, it works great. It's a very comfortable controller. And of course, there's cast screen, so if you have a device, a smartphone or tablet that can support cast screen, you can mirror it to your Nexus Player, which then leads into the negatives. It doesn't support Mirrorcast, which Google was pushing really hard at one point. There's no dedicated audio output port, there's no Ethernet port, and there's no regular size USB port. Now, I know the Ethernet port and the USB port, you can buy an adapter for about $2, some people say. That's not the point. If you're spending $100, it should be simple plug and play and done. I shouldn't have to buy an adapter to accomplish those two things. You're not supposed to play your own home videos. Google wants you to use Google services so they can make money, which is legit business concern. I totally get that and respect it. But for a $100 media player, that's a ripoff. This media player should have been $50. Now people claim they can play their own home videos, but there's a workaround. First you have to buy that USB adapter, then you have to get an Android app, File Explorer app, then you have to get also an Android media player app. Load those two apps onto a USB stick, take that USB stick, plug it into the adapter, and plug the adapter all together into the Nexus Player. Then install the File Explorer app, which there's no guarantee it's going to work. Then install the media player app like VLC Player. Again, there's no guarantee it's going to work on the Nexus Player. And let's not even get started on how many bugs and problems there are with this media player. And the weird thing is that Google hasn't released any updates yet. It seems as though they just kind of abandoned the Nexus Player. Overall, just avoid this media player. Just because it's co-designed by Google doesn't mean it's going to work great. It's actually one of the worst I've ever used. So that's my review of the Nexus Player. If you guys found this video useful, be sure to check out my Facebook, Google+, Twitter links in the video description. Hit the like button, it does help, subscribe, and thanks for watching.